Now, the theory of forms, it seems, answers many questions. It's answered the metaphysical questions. What is real? What is reality? How do we have truth? It also answers the epistemological questions. That is, how do you come to know these things? That is, you start in the world of illusion and you move your way on out to belief, reason through mathematics, and wisdom. So the allegory of cave is telling us something about the various levels of knowledge and belief and how we come to know things. So now, so far, the theory of forms has given us an answer to metaphysics, ontology, what's the nature of reality, the nature of the world. It's given us an epistemological answer, and it's also going to give us an answer to our questions of ethics and political philosophy, our questions of value, to which we're going to turn right now. Because the interesting thing is, we're going to see something about the nature of the mind is going to determine the relationship between the forms and the good life, and how they define the good life. So let's just quickly dive into Plato's view of, it could be called philosophy of mind, or psychology, or the soul. I mean, he talks about the soul, but the soul, I think, was something slightly different. According to Plato, and we saw this when we looked at the Meno, the soul is immortal. And why? Actually, in the Phaedo, he explains it's immortal because it is self-moving. What makes us unique in the world is that we can cause our own motion. We are the ones that are in charge of it. And he thinks that by looking at the soul, we're going to come to understand what the purpose in life is and how things should be regulated. But the first place he starts talking about this, the anatomy of the soul, what is the soul made of, is in the dialogue, the Phaedo, which is one that we have not read, but let me just spend a few minutes explain to you what the Phaedo is all about. Well, we're going to see in several places, Plato explains that the soul can be divided up into three parts. It gets a little bit different in the different places, but at least in the Phaedo, he says he wants you to think of the soul like being a chariot. You know, you guys may have seen the movie The Ten Commandments with Yul Brynner, you know, on his chariot, chasing after the Israelites as they're leaving, they're leaving Egypt on their way to the Promised Land. Well, think of it, the soul as being the whole chariot. And it's made up of really three parts. The charioteer, the guy who's driving it. And he says a good horse and a bad horse. And the idea is to get where you're trying to go on that chariot, the charioteer has to grab the reins and basically get the horses to work together and to go in the same direction. And notice, you see, Plato's kind of setting up the nature of the mind, that it has three parts and they're in conflict in a certain way. Hard to see it here, but when we turn to the Republic, he talks about the soul having three parts. One, the part that learns things, reason. Second, the part that feels anger, it's emotions. And the third, the one that desires pleasure, food, sex, etc., which he refers to as appetite. Now you might wonder, that is, there's a reasoning part of the soul, there's an emotional part of the soul, and there is an appetitive part of the soul, one that has desires, has these burning yearnings to do things. Now you say, gee, what he's saying seems to be true. I mean, people do sometimes exercise some reason and judgment. Sometimes they get very mad and it causes them to act. Because remember, the soul is the thing that makes us move. And then there is the desires that we have: food, sex, and pleasure. But why do we have to think that these are that there are three distinct things as opposed to three parts of the same thing, three functions of the same thing? And Plato does try to explain that. And the way he does that is he asks you to consider an example that a man could be thirsty but not willing to drink. For example, the doctors have ordered him, it's going to make him unhealthy, going to maybe kill him if he drinks. So notice in this case, reason has this reflective power. It sits back and kind of assesses things. That is, while I still would like to have my thirst quenched, I don't want to do it because it's going to have bad consequences. That is, my reason and my appetite are in conflict, so they can't be the same thing. And then he gives a couple of other examples. We desire some kind of perverted pleasure, pedophilia, something like that. So we really desire, but we get an answer.